remember what we're dealing with here in a chiropractic office. We're dealing with, and I wish I'd have wrote this down, but remember when you're a small business owner, there are, and let me kind of put this over here for a second. When you're a small business owner, and it says right out of the E-Myth, if you haven't read the E-Myth, I'd suggest you at least get the audio book. And you're dealing with 7 major categories that you have to juggle. There's 7 major categories, from you being the CEO of your business to, in other words, the decision maker. Somebody has to be the leader, decision maker, to the technical component. And the technical component is what the small business does. And in chiropractic, it's treating patients. If you're a plumber, it's doing plumbing. If you're a cabinet maker, it's making cabinets. So that's only one of 7. And then you have what's called the financial category. Somebody's got to pay the bills, do the billing, things like that. And then there's H&R, human resources, hiring and firing and training. And then there's a service category, applying the service. There's quality, somebody who's paying attention to the quality. And then there's what is called marketing. Those are the 7 categories, essentially, of a small business owner. And it's really a way to look at your business very differently, because remember, when we come out as chiropractors, everybody's mind is like 97% on the technical component. In other words, of all 7 categories, most people are only paying attention to the chiropractic part and very, very, very little parts of anything else. And remember this equation, remember there's 4 categories of making money in a business. One is new business, that's new business. The second one is repeat purchases, and then the fees you charge and your overhead. So those are the 4 categories of exchanging your time for money. And I used to explain to the students when I was at school, I'd go, okay, out of those 4 categories, those are the only 4 ways to make money in your business. That's it. And which category of the 7 categories of running a business, the new patient category, which one does it fit into? Well, that's called the marketing category. Marketing is responsible for new business. And then which category is responsible for patient retention? Well, that's marketing also. Marketing is patient retention. And then what category is responsible for your fees? Well, that's the financial department. And then what category is responsible for your overhead? Well, that's the financial department. So of the 4 main categories to run a business, only 2 categories, marketing and finance, cover those 2. And one thing that you'll notice was not written down there was the technical component. Nowhere is the technical component that a small business owner actually does, such as a chiropractor treating patients, or a plumber fixing plumbing, or a cabinet man fixing cabinet. Nowhere does that have anything to do with getting business and keeping business. Now, you'll lose business if you're bad at chiropractic and you're bad at plumbing and you're bad at cabinet making. So if you're bad at the technical component, you'll lose business, but that is not what will get you business. What gets you business is the marketing department. That's the new business and retention. And then the financial department deals with fees and overhead. And yet most chiropractors spend 97% of their time and their mind in the technical component. In other words, the chiropractic part. And that's not why you get paid. That's not why you make money. That's what you exchange for money, but that's not how you get the business or get it to stay, pay, and refer. So it's real important to understand this, because it helps open your mind up. And I see a lot of chiropractors, and this just happened last week. I was talking to a chiropractor, and he's not doing any staff meetings. And I'm constantly reminded how much that the guys I work with don't know. And it depends on where you come from and what level you're at. But I just could not believe that he did not think there was anything wrong or that he should even do a staff meeting. I asked him, I said, how do you think Apple can have the products and services that it offers without staff meetings? In other words, nobody getting together through and going through any systemization, organization, hierarchy, responsibility. How can you do anything without having staff meetings? And it never crossed his mind. And the reason it never crossed his mind is because he's a chiropractor. All he thinks about is treating patients. He doesn't think about anything else. Now, of course, this chiropractor is not doing well. He's seeing under 50 patient visits a week. So that's called market forces. Usually market forces get you between 20 and 40 patient visits a week. So there's no wonder. I said, how can you ever expect to do anything with your business when you don't have two people on the same page for any particular system? And you can't. You just have chaos. And remember, the chaos never shows at low levels. If you're seeing 40 visits a week or 20 visits a week, you can have a ton of chaos, and I say this all the time. You could have a ton of chaos, and you will never know it. And it'll be all that little chaos that now starts to be inhibiting you from growing to the next level. And so that's why I say everything you do should always be with the mentality of, is this what I need to be doing to see my goal? So whatever that goal is, like in my case, I said I wanted to see 200 visits a week. So everything that I did, the flow of my office, how patients were treated, reacted, everything, how it was laid out, everything was based on that. And I didn't let anything interfere with that. And I'll give you one little simple example and we'll move on. This doctor leaves the treatment room to go into another room where there's a little refrigerator to get an ice pack, to put an ice pack on somebody who is for pain and inflammation. And so I said, are you going to be able to do that seeing 200 visits a week? Are you going to be able to stop what you're doing, leave that station, walk down across the hall into another room, pull out an ice pack, and walk back? You see, when you're seeing 40 visits a week, you can cook a cheeseburger if you wanted to, and it wouldn't matter in all likelihood. But there's no way in hell that you can do that you can do that. You can leave that room and go and get an ice pack and come back. And he was doing the same thing with taping. He would go to another room to get taping because he would do some type of kinesiology taping. And again, when you're seeing 20 visits a week, you can walk out of that room and go get tape and come back. There's no way in hell you can do that seeing 150 or 200 visits a week. And that type of behavior will inhibit you and limit you from seeing 200 or 150 visits a week. And that's what you have to constantly look at with introspection, is what are the procedures, what is happening throughout that person's contact from start to finish. And is that a behavior pattern that is congruent and systematic with where I want to be? What is the end result? And if it's not, you have no business doing it, because that will become your limiting factor. So, having said that, the only reason I point out those 7 categories, the CEO, the technical, and all those 7 categories, is so many chiropractors they just focus on treating patients. That's all they see their businesses as, treating patients, and that's it. I'm like, no, treating patients is the easiest thing you're going to do in your practice if you haven't learned that yet. It's running your business. That's the hard thing. Treating patients is cake. And so also you have to compartmentalize. And one of those things you have to learn to be a high achiever, is you have to compartmentalize. There has to be a time set aside for staff meetings. There has to be a time set aside for the financial department. There has to be a time set aside for the marketing department, or you never get all this stuff done. And that's when you attack those categories specifically to get them running it at a real high efficiency levels. High efficiency meaning high profit, meaning better life for you. So most of the time the chiropractors kind of think of the whole day of treating patients. I'm like, no. If anything, what you should do is back off the time that you treat patients. Remember, the more time you give patients, the more they'll miss appointments, and the more they'll abuse that time and eat up that time. And really what you should do is decrease the time, not increase it. And I see that happening all the time. Doctors aren't seeing many patients, and so they open up their office till 7. No, that patient that could have came in at 5:30 now will come in at 6:30 just because you allowed it, instead of being in a position of control and letting the vast minority, the 3%ers, letting them go. Don't let those people dictate the 80% flow. And I see that a lot. So you have to compartmentalize. You have to have your treatment hours. You have to have your staff hours. You have to have your marketing hours. You have to have your training hours. Everything should be compartmentalized so you can do the functions of a CEO, Chief Operating Officer. It's not just showing up at 9, treating patients, and leaving at 6. That is not what running a business is about.